Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the PULP. Today, we have a pretty interesting topic. Should follow along suits of the humor episode. If you listen to that, you should. Shameless self-plug. So, Grayson, what's the juice today?
We're talking about stories, story time, anecdotes, and the little terrifying stories we tell to our little toddlers. Omari.
What is up, my dudes? Today, we actually have a live studio audience. So if you hear some voices in the background, you'll just know it's them.
Tell them to shut up.
we have a pretty, interesting guest today, to say the least. What's up?
Hi, I'm Aiden.
Hi, Aiden.
Welcome,
How are you
Aiden.
today?
I'm going to talk to you about some stories.
Yeah? Let's get it.
So is he giving stories or are we making stories?
We can make stories.
Or are we discussing elements of the story?
Elements of a good story.
What's a
Okay,
good story?
let's-
What makes a
Wait,
good story?
What if instead of talking about what makes a good story first, we talk about those terrifying nursery rhymes that we tell our
Okay,
children?
you know those actually, a lot of those old Disney princesses and stuff like that, those stories actually came from this Grimm book or whatever, and they all actually have super dark versions, and then people just made them all cheery.
Yeah,
I-
so they can show their 3-year-old Cinderella and make them feel great about life, when in reality, the original story was dark and terrifying.
Yeah.
I have myself a Grimm book of fairy tales back at home, actually.
Ooh.
So I know all those old stories.
Can you pull up some facts?
It's been a minute. Hold up. Well, I've heard there's always these horror stories about how Cinderella was originally meant to be I don't know,
Tatiana?
yeah, Tatiana. It's there's always a murder story behind it, right? Like the glass slipper was originally meant to kill someone or something, or she was going to
Yeah, they're pretty dark.
It's always dark, but that's not the original Grimm books of fairy tales one, from what I can remember. It's been a minute.
Hot minute.
Well, I mean, even if you think about what is it, Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, that has some pretty dark elements,
That has some pretty
poisonous
creepy
apple.
elements. I'm
It
just
does.
saying. 7 short dudes picked up a chick and brought her home.
Okay.
Yeah, everything about that's just kind of odd.
No, heck,
Home in the forest under a tree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not feeling Snow White and 7 Dwarves.
It reminds me of a biblical story.
Biblical stories are pretty dark too.
They're really dark.
Some of them are.
Let's talk about some. Let's talk about.
So we're talking about Naruto's reverse jutsu.
Interesting. For those at home who don't know, why don't you describe that for us?
Maybe we should. Maybe we should.
It's
I
not
mean,
that bad.
So
It's
I'll describe it.
describable.
So the first element that's needed in a story is a hook,
a hook.
right?
Oh wait.
Well,
Hook, line, and
we
sinker.
can go okay. There's a hook. There's a rising action. There's a climax. There's a falling action.
That's
and there's
boring.
a.
I'm all about that climax.
I mean, that's true. That's the plot. That's a plot.
Well, that's
so much work.
basic
That's
plot
like
line.
basic. Let's start with some steps.
It's always like that.
Yep. Yeah, I mean it's always like that, but let's start with some steps. So,
Mhm.
what do we first address when you're writing a story? The
you
end
need
goal.
a bomb tower. Title, not tower.
Title.
Do you need? I'm sorry, I had 9/11.
Title's last.
Anyway,
I thought we were talking about tarot cards.
Title is last.
title is last. You think?
Yeah.
Like the first line. Oh no. The back of the book. Get it? Well,
No, I'd say
yeah. Back of the book's kind of second
But
to
you
last.
got to write the book before you write
Yeah,
the
true, true.
synopsis.
I think
of
that
the
first
book.
line.
Synopsis.
If you read a book and the first line's once upon a time, you're like, here we go again. This shit gonna be.
I saw one strategy. I was working with it where you write a sentence, and then after that you take that sentence and you duplicate it. You make 2 sentences, and then you it's still the end goal should always be the same. You describe the same thing just in 2 sentences, so it's got more detail,
Mhm.
and you continue from there. You got 4 sentences,
What's an example?
and then 8 sentences. You just keep going to where you get to the details of what actually happened.
Yeah, you want to give an example of 2 sentences?
Okay, yeah. So you'd start with the first sentence, and the first sentence would be and Jack came tumbling down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So now Jack's at the bottom of the hill. So let's go with the 2 sentences. Jack climbed up a hill. Jack tumbled down a hill. Those are 2 sentences. Then 4 sentences. Jack and Jill climbed up a hill together. Jack brought the pail of water. Jill brought herself. I can't remember.
Mhm.
And then they both went tumbling down the hill. It gets more
Man,
detailed the more you
Jill
have.
brought her clumsy behind legs. That's what she brought.
Oof.
I was thinking about here's what's really interesting is genres, right? Or tragedies versus comedies. What defines a genre, and at what point do you think man, I'm the guest and I'm asking questions. But like,
So?
I know, it's just think it's funny.
Freedom, America.
Freedom, it really is.
Merca.
So, anyways, like, you know, what defines like different genres, and like how do we determine like how do we make a good story out of those genres? Like, is there a step? Do we go like, okay, we're gonna decide the genre, then where are we gonna pick out from that? How are we gonna make the story, and where we're gonna find like the morals, the themes, the motifs?
Yeah.
Is
yeah,
school a genre?
I think the genre is actually kind of important because it decides on what elements you use. Especially, and I think, you know, like the genres kind of came from back in the drama days. You know, you had those two masks. One was like comedy, one was like tragedy. So you had a good boy and you had a bad boy.
Well, I mean, it starts out like that, but it gets a little more complicated.
Obviously,
And-
now like we have more
yeah,
complicated genres
and
and stuff.
I think this is similar to like D&D and making campaigns. So you start off with the campaign and you figure out where it wants to go, and then you would figure out quests and how you get there. But you don't go into the details. So like one quest could be like a specific genre. You could split up these things into different genres, and I feel like chapters can do the same thing, or volumes can do the same thing, to where one book feels more like this adventure thing, and then you follow that up with the next book being more of a mystery kind of thing. So they're figuring out the first book, they're figuring out like the world, and then they figure the next book, someone dies in that world. It's more of the murder mystery, but now they have the background knowledge to build on. And I think something that's really important is Tolkien. His strategy for writing the Lord of the Rings was he made the map first, surprisingly, and wrote the story around the map.
That's pretty cool.
So
It seems like you're kind of suggesting like, almost like you start with framework
yeah,
and then you fill it up.
you start with a world. I think it's one of the best ways.
Yeah,
to do it.
that's
You
pretty
start,
important.
You start with the world, what the world's like, what's the position of the world. So like World War III, you know, it always starts there, something like that.
Because while the genre decides the elements, the framework almost decides the tools or the pieces that you're using.
Yeah.
With what elements.
Well, I think if you have like a well-established world,
Mhm.
you don't have to spend time later on while you're writing, doing whatever, telling the story to decide how this one element affects another element in the world, like D&D. Like
Yeah.
if you know like what elements beat what elements, you can implement that into the story, make it work smoother, better, whatever the case
Exactly. And
may
if you
be.
do it well, you don't have to pull up J.K. Rowling and make something up when the book's already released.
Yeah,
Oh.
exactly.
There were details though, Omari. Like she knew he was gay the whole time.
Yeah,
Oh wait,
I'm
sorry,
sure- I'm
I didn't
sure.
mean to get into specifics.
Oh,
For those of you who don't know,
Dumbledore's gay.
yeah, the author of the Harry Potter series has this habit of basically claiming that characters are something. For example, Dumbledore is gay. After she's already written the book, in order to, it seems, to push some sort of agenda or to gain an audience using whatever she claims that they are. And it just seems a little fishy because
I think we can agree that if you read the books, you know that Dumbledore aimed towards the more asexual side. There was no right or
it's
left.
more
on the
like
dial.
my man was just chilling more than anything.
he was like, it wasn't his desire. His desire was Harry.
Whoa, is that a sign?
No,
Harry boy.
is Voldemort like male? It wasn't confirmed.
Oh my god, dude. I can't. Okay, I'm sorry.
Wait, but
I
whenever
digress.
Whenever he
Hermione's
there's a whole
black.
backstory. Okay.
You guys see that post? Someone thought Hermione was black, and then like someone took a picture of their book where it said Hermione's whited face was terrified, and like
Oh.
I mean, like,
wow.
some things shouldn't come out of nowhere. Build like we talked about. I think this is going back to what we said.
Mhm.
Your tools are what make it. So like your genre, then your world, and your tools. So you establish the tools first, not last, or you'll come into these continuity errors where Hermione's black 1 second and white the next.
Yeah, and that's, so I think we kind of seem to have developed sort of two steps, if you will. You know,
Yeah.
you develop your world, develop your framework,
Which comes first though?
and then select your genre. I think the framework is more important.
Okay. So you build your world,
Yeah,
and then you
because
build.
I mean, if you,
have
build
to
a fantasy,
understand what you're doing.
yeah, I mean, I
That's
feel
the
like if you
thing.
build like a fantasy, like if you build a medieval framework, then you can decide if this is a horror, if this is a romance, if this is
Yeah,
a
that
drama
makes
within
sense.
that universe.
Because then like you might step into the area, if you go with genre first, you might step into the area of cliches.
It's true.
When
yeah,
you're
exactly.
looking for framework. So if you start with your framework and then you're like, well, okay, we have a fantasy world. What usually doesn't happen in a fantasy world? Detective. You know, a detective in the fantasy world. Like, so you started with that and then you went into the mystery genre.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. So I think those are our two steps so far.
I was thinking about excuse me. I was thinking about like, what if we started like with a character, right? Okay, so say I was going to take a character, like I don't know, Kaneki, and like it was going to be like, so we take this character and we want to put concepts around him, right? Motifs and themes, right? Like tarot cards or biblical references or Kafka references, right? Existentialism, and we take this character and we go like, we want to make a theme off of him. We want to turn him like in a reference to this character that I just referenced, Kaneki, right? It would be for him to be the king, for him to progress himself towards like a tragic like story, and still follow like themes of well, as far as tarot cards, like the Hangman and like I don't know, what was it, like death or like despair or something, but still like coming out on top, like a symbol of strength in that way. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then like from there you can go, okay, so I have this character, I have this mold, and I want to create a world in which he can thrive in, and still there's an understanding of suffering that is parallel to our own world. Or like if we were to go to Naruto or something, like the cycle of hatred, right? It's supposed to parallel our own world, and because it parallels our world is the basis. So like you can take basis from, you can start from a character or start from like something within our own lives to like motivate, like to create a world around it.
Yeah. So being relatable is important then.
Yes. Possibly. And I think one thing that you pointed out there is pretty important is the fact that the framework of the world needs to be established as well as the framework of the characters, not just one or the other. Both.
Yeah, both. So the framework of everything.
Illusions are extremely important.
I think it's like a step 3 kind of thing. Like you make your themes and your illusions, your references and stuff like that after you've made your framework and then the world. But also, I was thinking of something that you were saying. Oh, I can't remember. Shoot, never mind. Go somewhere else. I'll think about it.
Mostly related to the framework. And like basically, well, what were you gonna say?
I just said illusions were extremely important. And if we wanted to do an example, it could be like the rule of 3. That's an extremely like relevant illusion that's in like a lot of works.
Yeah, the rule of 3 is sort of interesting because of like how balanced it is and its implication. Because I don't know, it never feels like too much or too little, and it's one of those rules that just upholds over time almost endlessly.
Okay, I got it now. You were talking about Naruto, and like looking at like the progression of Naruto, it goes from like this like kind of pre-modern to like almost like actual modern really quickly throughout the series. Not like super quickly, but it happens pretty quickly, like especially in Naruto's hometown. And like you see this progression, and I think it's more where what you were saying, the character is built first in Naruto's world. It's what it feels like, and then the world is wrapped around the characters, so like Naruto, Sasuke, whatever the characters needed at the time, the world wraps around that. Like he had maps and stuff, but like the world progressed at a speed to where he could have what he wanted for the elements in the story as he needed them.
I really like stories that are really based around the characters that it's the way that the author like pulls what he wants out of the characters and makes like them into like what he needs them to be. Like in the case of Naruto and Sasuke, it's like he wanted them to be the strongest of rivals, and like the world was basically around them. It was their world that they were creating like as they progressed, starting from a very like basic standpoint of loneliness and like turning that loneliness into power basically.
I think it's like why you see the differences in like these series and stuff. Like Lord of the Rings, it feels really nice to see it all, and like the split stories and everything makes it a really nice really nice flow, and it gives like the depth to it. And Lord of the Rings has it based off the world, and that's why the world is so interesting, because it started out where it was based off the world, and then he wrapped characters around that, and it was like the unexpected thing where a hobbit came and was the main adventurer. It wasn't like the cliche. And then also the character building is what avoids the cliche as well. Like Naruto, it started where he built his world around the character, so everything wrapped, and he could warp like each of these like writers could warp their stories around however they wanted it, and it worked really well. So I think characters and world are kind of both in the same spot but not the same way, so it kind of splits.
We have world-based stories and we have character-based stories. Let's say that right now.
Yeah,
right?
The distinction is necessary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So we have world-based stories and we have character-based stories. World-based stories, the world is rich, and there's like, if I was to write a fan fiction on like Lord of the Rings, like I have so much more freedom. Right?
It'd be rough though, because you'd have to like know your facts, but it's set there.
Yeah,
it's set in stone.
I do agree with what you're saying. Like the freedom would be insane because it's a developed world already. It's not building around these characters. You have a world to play in. But it's sandbox mode.
But like if we're going to go back to Naruto, I'm just keep going back to Naruto with the characters,
Keep it
right?
consistent.
It is. It makes sense, and people know it, I guess, right? So Naruto, we go back to Naruto, and it's like, okay, well, these characters, like the entire world is their world, right? So like if you try to make like your own thing, it's like, well, what's the point? Because it's these characters. It's all about these characters, and that doesn't, and that's not like crapping on those stories, because I told you I prefer character-based stories because it's like we can see into the characters themselves better, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you wanted to have your own freedom to it, there just wouldn't be anywhere near as much freedom.
Yeah, and I think with that, it's almost like with the character-based stories, you actually get more focus on a story that's already developed, whereas in these more world-based stories, you get a focus on a story that's being developed.
I can kind of feel that.
Yeah, and like Naruto, so Kishimoto, he does do the character
Who is
thing.
who?
Kishimoto, author of Naruto. He develops like Naruto and Sasuke like really well, and those like main characters, he develops them well, and then he expands the world and like the background and everything around those characters to implement like whatever like goal is. So like to be the strongest ninja, whatever. So he like creates elements to benefit them, like Final Valley. There's like it's like created from Madara and Hashirama, like to the prior ninja, whatever, super strong. They were rivals, and he uses that as like a tie-in, and it develops the characters really well. But it also develops the like world, if you think about it, because the characters tie into the world and the background, the like everything about the like story just begins to develop more so.
Yeah, but it starts with the characters. Now, what I needed to establish was I think we're getting to a problem where some things don't fit with a genre. So like a detective, it kind of feels like this is more of a triangle than a step system, because it can start anywhere, because like character, world, and then also genre, because genre, you can't have a world genre if you're going to do like a detective thing unless you wanted the reader to be the detective.
Yeah.
Like you can't have like a detective where the whole thing's based off the world and then you don't have that character development, because then it's feels kind of bland and like straightforward.
Yeah.
It almost feels like you have like Sherlock but not Sherlock.
I mean,
it's just like a
it
blank
kind of
slate.
works. It's just more like you force the reader, like you were saying, the reader will be the detective.
Yeah, and they'd have to it'd be like for a very selective audience, because they would have to appreciate the world building and forget the character. Like the character by then is then neglected, and like,
have you seen anime?
Sherlock is a character-based story for sure.
Yeah. That's why I'm saying like
Yeah.
it's like having Sherlock without Sherlock is what I was like. If you develop just the world, it's gonna reach this problem where like you have this imbalance and you can't really have that thing. But like adventure, something like Lord of the Rings, the adventure stuff needs that world, and you can't really have characters if it's an adventure anime.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Anime.
Yeah, but on the other hand, hear me out. Like in terms of like detective things that we've seen, as you said, Sherlock is a character-based one, and it was done really well. So like we love Sherlock, but Sherlock without Sherlock would be boring, most likely, because the world isn't developed. But that's because they chose not to develop the world.
Yeah.
I don't know if we actually have seen a detective anything where the world is developed first. So like it could work out well, but I don't really know if we've seen one, because as you're saying, it might have a selective audience. But however, that selective audience could be way bigger than you think, because I don't think we've really seen one.
But if it's based off the world, like I think the best approach to something like that would be the reader is the detective. It's read in first person. Something where
That's fair. Like
it's
those make your own adventure books. Where, like, you turn into a specific. Yeah, I like those.
it could be like that, or it could just be just a straight up read. Yet like it's in a first person, kind of like a Percy Jackson kind of thing.
Gotcha.
It's going on to Percy Jackson and stuff. I have a pretty good example. Okay, so here's the thing. There's this anime, right? It's a detective Loki anime. Loki, as in the Norse god Loki, right? And it's almost like the world is already developed because it's based off of Norse mythology, and he's a detective. Now, it's still probably more of a character developed detective type of anime because it is detective based, but like there's supposed to be like this mystery to Loki so that he can kind of like keep you on edge. You don't know everything about Loki. I suppose you could say the same thing about Sherlock, because you kind of gotta like you kind of want to keep wanting more from these stories basically and their characters. So it is focused on their characters, but it is interesting how we can take these illusions and like make already a pre-developed world almost.
Maybe that's the key to like having the detective world-based series is making the main character mysterious, like leaving his backstory unknown. So you don't really know anything. You don't know if your main character is like a good guy or the bad guy. He could be the suspect. He could be the culprit. Like if you leave it open, then I guess a world-based detective series would work.
It has to develop the world, and you can't focus on the character.
Exactly, and that's why I think it was pretty essential though when you said there was a triangle, because like it needs to be a balance.
Mhm.
Especially like when you're saying when you pick a genre like this, I feel like what you're saying with the detective thing, this would be a focus leaning more towards genre. But if you're gonna lean more towards a genre, then you need the world and the characters to be well enough to back it up. Because if they slack, then you're just gonna fail completely. So that's why I feel like the triangle was actually a pretty good example because it's gonna need to be balanced or it's gonna topple over.
Yeah, kind of like adventure needs that world,
Mm-hmm.
but characters are still important in an adventure thing because
Exactly.
like then there's no character interaction.
like
It
if
doesn't give depth. Like
Exactly.
depth is
Like
what.
if you're focusing on adventure, you cannot have a closed world.
Well, another interesting example would be Fairy Tale, right? Because Fairy Tale, it is extremely character based, but it also tries to call itself an event. Oh my bad. It also tries to call itself an adventure, right? Because like it's the idea is that they're going through like the world in their own way, but it is most certainly by definition of what we're doing, it is definitely just mostly character because they don't really do
For
world
sure.
building. Yeah,
the world builds after the story.
it builds extremely after, but
And
they would
around the
still call it.
characters.
They would still call it an adventure because it seems like they are going on an adventure.
And there's that balance.
I mean, it's kind of interesting to like use a triangle. Not to be cliche, but brings it back to threes,
Rule of 3.
that motif, and then it also like it gives you options because if you start at the world, you can focus on the world and then characters like heavily and develop them like in a strong manner, and then focus on genre later.
and you don't
so-
like have a genre. Like it's
Yeah.
just open. Like it's just an open world where
Exactly.
you just have this deep world and then
And
anything
it
can
can
happen.
just be an
Yeah.
adventure genre with a detailed world and detailed characters, and then the genre is just kind of like whatever happens in
Yeah.
the show or book or whatever.
And it seems like sometimes, like when you're really, really, I don't know if I want to say lucky or just good, you're in a good position, you can get sort of two really big areas. And I see that because of something like Harry Potter, right? It's a series where people got attached to the characters a lot, and the characters did develop and grow with the series, but the world was also massive enough for people to create their own things within the world and still like exist inside that world as well.
I think Harry Potter is a character-based story with a small world. The series itself seems very restrictive on like the world building, but then they left it open to where sequels like Fantastic Beasts and stuff like that can come out,
Yeah.
and it makes sense. And that was a very good like decision making point, because like if you leave the world to where it's closed, then you can focus on all the characters and have like in-depth characters. Like you never really know what Ron's gonna do, and it leaves it to where the characters feel alive, and yet your world isn't something that's restricted because there's still secrets inside of Hogwarts, kind of thing.
Exactly, yes.
It's kind of interesting because so Harry Potter opens up its world like a good just enough to keep you thinking, and that's really important for a story.
Mhm.
And there's this balance of like choosing what you want to keep from the reader exactly. Like, do you want to keep world or character development from the reader so that you can get the reader to want more?
Okay, real quick, I have this idea where you have so many points, and you can allot them to each category. You can allot this amount of points
Yeah, I
to
don't
world,
think like that's
character,
not-
and genre,
Mhm.
but that everyone has the same amount of points. So, like what he was saying, you leave a little bit of points so where the world's open,
Yeah.
like you see a little bit in, but there's so many secrets that it leaves people interested. So you allot a little bit of points there, a lot of points into character, and a lot of points into genre, and it's got a good story where everything's mysterious and interesting.
Yeah, and if like with that mysterious like idea, if you keep the world somewhat closed off, you can use that to like add in things later on. So like say you start doing this one thing and then and you're like running out of ideas, you can open up that world more because you kept some elements of it mysterious, that it's not like completely restricted because of the openness and like the mysterious like elements that you kept in the world. It just allows it to flow maybe a little bit better, make excuses and like maybe loopholes for the writer if they like make a mistake or need to add something, whatever the case may be.
Like so open that you can call it Dumbledore gay and get away with it.
That's fair. Yeah. And like, it's interesting because I kind of think of it like an open triangle, if you will. Because like, if you think of a triangle, imagine in the case of Harry Potter that the world is at the top, so you have genre and your character at the bottom, the bottom two corners. Like if you get genre and character to a point where they're, they've a lot of points to where the base is like balance, then with the open triangle it can grow. You can move the legs to the left and right as much as you need to keep it growing, as much as you need to until it closes.
We have different views on this.
That's fine. I mean,
you
hey,
think the world's pretty open. I think the world's pretty closed, and the characters is what she focused on.
well, no, I think that's what I was saying. Like the genre and the characters are what's the solid base, but she left the world open enough to where it can grow. Like the
I thought you said
triangle.
like world was her main
Mars-
focus.
Oh no.
Mar's just saying what I said earlier. Pretty
Yeah.
much with that.
Yeah.
Shoot, what was I saying? Oh yeah, okay. I want to talk more about what Donnie was bringing up with how like by leaving certain things out, like if you like miss something, you can still make up for it with retcons, basically, right? It's like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, right? The guy forgets stuff all the time, and like it doesn't matter because he's so creative and his world's so open, and there's so many possibilities that he can just throw stuff in there, and it just leaves the reader still wanting more. It's part of like closing off specific parts, but still like because his is a character-based story but it's an adventure that goes around, kind of like how I was talking about Fairy Tail, except his is a lot more expansive, and it's like. But he can just throw in abilities or throw in anything that like just leaves you going like in awe with the pure creativity of it, the pure like you never know what's going to happen of it, and that's what he has to close off. It's in that way that he closes off the world, closes off the expansion. Like you don't know that there's these abilities until it comes up, and with that he can move around his world however he wants to.
I think it's like we've been saying this whole time, the allotted points, and then if you go a little bit too far with those allotted points, then you get something like
You kind of
Dragon Ball.
I was gonna say you write yourself into a corner.
Yeah,
That's it.
and it's like if you're spending your points too quickly, you'll get to where everyone's OP, and then it's kind of the same thing, and it kind of repeats. So you can't write yourself into a corner because the world is now too many people understand
It's almost like
a
you
lot
have the
about Dragon Ball.
It's almost like you have the same triangle with the same proportions, but you try to stretch it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
like now everyone is like, well, now I know a lot about the world, and so there's things he can't do, and he kind of restricted himself.
That's true.
And I think something that's to avoid that, you could time skip. Like that's always a valid option. If you
Sure.
want to jump yourself out of a corner, time skip. It's just what happens usually, just to allow for like progression that the readers couldn't predict.
Dragon Ball is a good example of like just like everything's already out there though, so there's really nothing.
Yeah.
Like so he'll throw something out there, and it's like, why did they use that earlier? Like, why is it there now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think another good example is kind of the Arrowverse shows, in a sense to where in their first few seasons, all of the shows basically they put out really fast, as you were saying with a lot of points. They put out really fast. This is what. And for people who don't know the CW shows, I mean like Arrow, Flash, Legends of Tomorrow, those they put out their points so fast, they spent their points so fast, the audience can see this is what I'm getting from the show. This is this show's formula, and like you said, you write yourself sort of into this. Or, I mean, other than the fact that it's already an established universe, you also establish the formula for your show, and that just sort of like it restricts you in a very specific way to the point where although you're getting new things, it's the new thing in the same formula. It's almost like a sheep in wolf's clothing, it's the same.
The
It's
Krabby Patty's secret formula. That's why Plankton never figures it out, and that's why SpongeBob is the best anime. All right, I think it's time that we wrap it up. Any final points?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I was saying, the triangle actually is almost perfect. And if you want to have that room for growth, then you need a triangle with at least two balanced sides, on that bottom, and have that open top.
Yeah.
If you want to develop something, you have to have some kind of foundation, whether it be in the story case, world, character, genre, whatever it may be. You need that solid base, whether you want to use 2, 1, whatever. You need it so you can develop a good story, tell a good tale, make it work out in whatever way it needs to be. So it's important. Yeah.
Dramatic conventions can define the world as well with the genres and illusions. It all builds the world together.
I feel like it's kind of like a triangle within a circle. So you got the triangle, everything is important in the triangle, and then you've got these things that go a little bit outside, and those are the illusions, the themes, and it's like encircling the whole world, but it's like you can go outside the triangle sometimes just to get those themes in there. And that's it for the Pulp today. Thank you for listening. Bye.